Thanks. Afternoon, everybody. As you heard from that brief bio, I'm the IT guy, so I don't think my presentation will probably be as entertaining or scintillating as the first ones. But just as a way of opening, how many in the audience are actively publishing authors at the moment? So we've just got a couple. I must admit, when Lazarus asked me initially to please do a short presentation, I was at a little bit of a loss to link OROSS to open access publishing. And of course, OROSS applies to any kind of publishing. It's open access publishing as well as all the conventional publishing or publishing in the conventional journals. And it's also linked to any other output type, so any other research output type that is produced. And I'm going to skip through some of my slides. Let's see if we are actually working here. If not, not to worry. I'll speak while I've got some of those up. You can skim through them, but Lazarus has done a really good job, really, of introducing the purpose of OROSS. We had a little bit of a bit of fun with the name OROSS. It's very descriptive. Of course, it stands for the Online Research Output Submission System, and it really arose as an initiative of our VC. He identified the fact that an institution as large as UJ and as sophisticated as UJ really needs a very simple, preferably electronic, web-based methodology of allowing researchers to submit their research output. And the research output, the reason we need to submit it, of course, has been covered. It's really twofold. The first is that research needs to be submitted to the DHET for subsidy. And of course, perhaps more important in the context of this workshop, is the research needs to find its way into DSpace, into the institutional repository. And I've listed a couple of reasons there why that's so important, but Lazarus really, I think, has covered them really well. But the most important thing from my perspective as the IT person, as the systems person, is how did we put together a system that is going to be particularly user-friendly and is not going to add to the burden or the administrative burden of researchers? Because as we all know, that researchers generally tend to shy away from administration, and there are already many administrative obstacles in their way. So when we come up along with another system and say, right, prof or doctor, we need you to submit your research output for the following reasons, they are going to say, well, we already do that. So what we did was, we actually, a task team was put together by our previous DVC for research. And I was very pleased. One of the main people on that task team was our own Prof. Alan Amaroy, one of our publishers, and I think a B-rated researcher. He was co-opted to the task team really for two reasons. First of all, he had the technical expertise to develop the system that we had in mind. And second of all, as a fairly prolific publishing author, he was also sympathetic to the obstacles that a researcher would face in terms of submitting their research output. So my presentation is going to take the form more of a short demo, really, on how the system works. So in a nutshell, the whole idea of OROSS is really to be a conduit to allow a researcher to easily submit their research, firstly for publication or for storage on DSpace, on the IR, and secondly for accreditation, or rather for the purposes of subsidy for the DHET. So it's a web-based system. I've put very large at the top there, the link to it. Just please take note, it is HTTPS. That S just indicates a secure link. There's no www, and the URL is very straightforward. It's ulink.uj.ac.za. As soon as you go to that link, you'll see the small box on the right-hand side there, the ulink box. You log into the system, which I think is quite nice, with your UJ username and password. You do not have to register for the system. You don't have to remember another set of credentials. It's your standard computer's username and password, which of course is different to your internet username and password, which is a little bit confusing. You can log on from any computer, of course. It's not restricted to being on campus. For those who may want to do this at home, you of course can do that. And Prof. Amaroy has a quite a strong dislike for the Microsoft browser Internet Explorer, which some of you may be aware of. So he's designed the system to exploit some of the nicer features of the other browsers, the primary one being Google Chrome, but also Firefox and the built-in Apple browser as well. As far as I know, this will work with Internet Explorer, but it does keep popping up messages saying, are you aware that this pop-up might open, that pop-up might open? So if you insist on using Internet Explorer, you can. But we would really encourage you to use Google Chrome or Firefox. Once you've logged into that link and you've entered your username and password, you'll see that screen, the gray screen at the bottom there will come up. And roughly in the middle, there's a section called Administrative Utilities. And under that is the Research Submission System. Clicking on that will take you into the system. And I'm going to ask Lazarus to assist me. We're going to log on and do a little bit of a live demonstration. We can use, I think, either PC, but I think that one is already set up. And just a note while they get themselves sorted out there, this is actually a very new system, and it's really, at this stage, it's ready to go. It's a little bit of a work in progress. So what we are doing is we encouraging the early adopters amongst us all to please submit research output to it and to give us their feedback. If they notice something that's a little bit complicated or doesn't make sense or is awkward to use, to please let us know. And Prof. Amaroy has been particularly good. Anything we give him, as soon as he's got a little bit of free time, he'll make the changes for us. So we've already submitted, after our second round of training, a couple of changes that we've asked him to implement. He hasn't managed to implement them just yet, but that won't affect the demo at all. Just to explain as well, sorry, while we wait, the system does two things behind the scenes. When you submit one of your research outputs, the first thing the system does is it automatically directs that research output to the library, where it goes to Lazarus, and that then goes straight into DSpace. And Lazarus makes sure that all the conditions around an output, whether there's an embargo on publishing it or displaying it, if there's any copyright issues, anything like that, are taken care of. He also adds all kind of metadata around it so that it can be easily located and searched. And all of that happens seamlessly. So you do not have to send your output specifically to the library and specifically to the research office. You just submit it once through the system. And as soon as you click submit, it will then automatically be directed to Lazarus. If you have at the start, and we'll go through that now in a little bit more detail, if the person submitting the research output has indicated that the submission is for DHET subsidy, simultaneously that output will be directed to your research or your faculty research coordinator. They will do various checks in terms of vetting that output in terms of the DHET policy for subsidy before it comes to the research office, where the in-detail manipulation takes place to make certain that that research output is in the right format for the DHET and is likely to be subsidized. But again, that happens behind the scenes. It's nothing that you have to do. You will also receive a copy of what has been submitted to the library and to our office in the form of an email. It's just a zip file containing all the portions or the components of the submission. So you now also have a permanent record and proof that you did indeed submit that output for either for accreditation or purely for the IR purposes. So we'll see there, if Lazarus can just skip back to step one. He's quite eager there. So as you'll see there, the way Prof. Amaroy has designed the system is he's made it as simple and as straightforward as possible. There's 5 steps. You'll see the first step there is highlighted in orange, indicating that you're on that step. Just a little note of caution. He's got a note there at the bottom, but in our experience, almost nobody has read it. It says, please do not use the browser back button, as all the information is stored on the page and it could be lost if you use the browser back button. So if you are at stage 3 and you realize you need to go back to 2 or 1, there'll be a little back arrow. Use that rather than your browser's back button, else you may lose that information. So the very first screen there, the submission type, is very straightforward. It just asks you to select what is the type of the research output you wish to submit. There's all the DHET accredited types there, and of course there's other for any other type, and that would be specifically for things like the creative outputs at the library and basically anything else that may not be covered under the normal subsidizable research. And there's a tick box to indicate whether you, as the submitter, feel that this will qualify for DHET subsidy. If you feel it does qualify and it doesn't, that's something that you don't really need to concern yourself with, because your faculty research coordinator, as well as our office, will do the screening on that. So the first step would be to simply choose one of the output types, and let's choose a journal article, and you would click on continue. The next step, part 2 there, the authors, it's just a matter of capturing the authors one after the other. You'll see the boxes are there. Lazarus can perhaps just put in an example there. Any field that you have to fill in is compulsory, so it will indicate, or it will alert you if you haven't filled it in completely. And the UJ number or institution is just your staff number, or if the researcher is a student that you happen to be supervising, obviously their student number. And you can add as many as you need. You'll need to click on add, and you'll see when you click on add, it adds it to the list at the bottom there. There's a little cross to delete it if you realize you've made a mistake. And one of the changes we asked Prof. Amaroy to make, and he wasn't too keen to make it, was you'll see it hasn't cleared the previous researcher. So if you're coming to enter another researcher, you have to type over it. He felt that was a really useful feature because you might have made a mistake and just wanted to correct it and click add without typing it in all over again. But based on feedback from the community, we'll ask him to either change or not change that. So you can just add them one after the other, and when you finish, click on continues. So I think Lazarus, it's no need to add another one, but yeah, that's fine. Typically, you would add them as well. It's not too important, but you would generally add the authors in the sequence that they appear on the research output. So now you can see there we are already on stage 3 out of 5. The submission title will be the title of your journal article or your book or your chapter in the book or the conference proceeding, whatever it is. The abstract is just some free text. It's not compulsory, I don't think, but we really encourage you to put that in, because that forms not only metadata in DSpace, but it's also really useful for us when we receive queries from deans and executive management, for example, to say, what AIDS-related research is UJ currently active in, and we rely heavily on the abstract to pull out keywords. And of course, you can just copy and paste that, because you'll almost certainly have access to an electronic version of the output. The journal is the name of the journal, of course, and then some basic information about that. If it doesn't have a volume or an issue, because those are compulsory, you can just enter zeros. And of course, the page numbers are the numbers of not the entire journal or the entire book, but your particular submission. Which citation index is it in? ISI, IBSS, or South African? The ISSN, of course, is compulsory. The SESM code, that's something that anybody that submitted a research output will be very familiar with. That's the classification of educational subject matter, also a requirement of the Department of Higher Education and Training. Normally those SESM codes, there's 20 of them and they're numbered 0 to 20. We've asked Prof. Amaroy just to put the number in, because a lot of faculties and even researchers are familiar with the number but not the description. So that will be added in, but it's just a matter of selecting it. And then source of funding. The sources of funding that we list there are aligned with the R&D survey that we have to submit to government. So it's really just an attempt to identify who is primarily funding the research that's happening at UJ. It's not a compulsory field, if I can put it that way, but it's really something we would encourage you to fill in if you do have the information, because it does start to give us some nice stats for management reporting. We encourage you not to use other or unknown if you can possibly avoid it, but just skimming through the options, the ones that we find are primarily used are, the screen is not too clear, so I'm just going to go through a couple of them. There's the URC ones and FRC ones. Very often we'll find a query comes up where a researcher will say, but it's neither of those, it's my own research trust account. Your research trust account is funded by your faculty research committee or from primarily or the URC, normally the FRC. So the quick answer to that is if it's your own research trust funds that you're using, it's actually faculty research committee money that has been used. In the case of the sciences, health sciences and so on, normally it's very obvious. You get Science Council funding, and on the we do have additional info as to what are the different funders that fall under those different categories. Humanities, it's normally University Research Committee and Faculty Research Committee. But it's, to be quite honest, this is a little bit of a best guess. Take your best guess at accurately picking the funder. Yep, let's continue. Okay, so we're on the second last step, which is also perhaps the most annoying step, but it is actually very easy. To support the application, we do have to provide, or the researcher does need to provide a number of supporting documents. The first hurdle in this is, of course, that they would have to have them electronically. From Prof. Amaroy's feedback, most people should have the electronic copies already. If not, we're going to have to rely on scanning them. Things like a book, of course, you don't have to scan the entire book. You would scan, for example, the cover page, the couple of pages that give you the table of contents and the various other information, and perhaps the last page. A chapter, similar things. You would need to scan the book's cover page, table of contents, and then of course the details about the chapter as well. The reason we have asked, or the reason Prof. Amaroy suggested that we do it like this is, in order, if we just gave you one field and said, please upload the attachments, we know researchers from practice, they probably wouldn't give us everything we need. So the idea of this page is really to ensure that in the attachments that we do get, that we get at least the cover page, the page that has the ISSN on it, the page that has the table of contents on it. And sorry, Lazarus, if you can just skip back there for a sec. We need the table of contents, the article itself, if you have the whole article, and then the manuscript. And here I just want Lazarus to come in for a second and explain what exactly is the difference between the article and the manuscript. I know that's normally obvious to the researchers, but to people that aren't publishing like myself, and seeing as I have to do the training, I really never understand the difference between the two. You'll see next to each option there's a choose file button, and if you click on that choose file button, it will just open up your normal Windows PC file dialog box, and you can then select the appropriate file. It may well be that you have a single scan that encompasses all the information that has been asked there. This is still a little bit of a, I won't say a work in progress, but Prof. Amaroy feels quite strongly that we do need to separate the different types of information that are being requested into specific requests. So if you've got one scan that contains all the information being requested, as the system is at the moment, you would just need to attach it 4 or 5 times. That sounds a little bit onerous, but in practice it's extremely quick. It's literally just a couple of clicks. You've got your same file, you choose it, and it literally doesn't even take 30 seconds to fill the page out. So what we're going to do is sort of keep an eye on that. If we get a lot of complaints about that, we'll probably have to go back to him and see if we can find a better way of doing it. But in all the training and the couple of pilot users that are using it at the moment, so far we haven't had a single objection, so I'm holding thumbs. Ezra, if you can just, because all of those are compulsory, you'll just have to attach a couple. Okay, and I think that's all of them. You've got all of them in. The supplier motivation for a late submission. Rita, did we agree that that would come out, or was that still a valid option? No, it's going to come out. It is going to come out. Okay, so you can ignore that one. As soon as you've attached everything, and you could see actually while we were chatting, Lazarus attached all 5 of them, so it's really not too onerous. You're now finished with step 4. You can click on continue. And the final screen, quite important, is really just to identify your faculty off the list. And then very important are the 2 email addresses that the system is asking for. The first email address is, of course, just your own email address. That ensures that you receive a copy of what you've submitted. So it will be a time and date stamped copy, which is your proof that you have submitted the research output, and that it has gone to both our office and the library. The second one is the faculty administrator's email address. That is quite important, and it can be a number of people. It could be a department head, it could be a department secretary, but we would encourage you to send it directly to your faculty's research coordinator, because they then follow with the screening process for especially the DHET accredited outputs. I take it everybody would probably know their faculty's research coordinator, but if not, I've got some contact details on the last slide. You're welcome to contact us, and we can certainly send it to you. No question, Prof? Good. Right, Lazarus, when you're finished. And that's it. So it really is a quick 5-step process. What's happened now in your inbox is immediately a summary of that submission that you've sent. And you'll also see there it says your submission has been archived. If you click on that little archive, it will ask you to open it. You'll see it's just a zip file. And in that zip file is literally just the components you submitted. So you'll find a number of attachments there, the cover page, the ISBN number, all of the attachments you uploaded are included for your own reference. And information, Lazarus, if you just open the information text box there in the middle, second from the top, within the window that you're in. Okay, go back to archived. Open up again. And then information, if you just open up information. That is just a copy of the information that you provided. You can, if you're worried about duplication and your email box filling up with copies of the same scans that you've already got on your hard drive, you can just delete it. But we found in practice, we get quite a couple of people who, after the DHET submission, will insist that they did submit something and we have no record of it. And this will really, really help just as keeping that paper trail. We're not going to go through the process for submitting a non-accredited article is identical, except it doesn't ask for the DHET specific things like the CESM and the funding source. So it's actually a little bit simpler, which is why we chose the journal article as the more complex submission. And that's really as simple as it is. So I'm very keen to get some feedback from the audience here. Does this seem like a useful system? Does it seem like extra admin that you'd rather not do? Does it seem too complex to use? Are you quite pleased that this facility is now available so that you know exactly how to submit and where to submit and what to submit? Yeah, comments are welcome.